Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. If you love and support the work that we do, head to www.sexedwithdb.com and buy some of our hot new merch. Follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast. And if you want to advertise with us, shoot us an email at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Today's episode is with the wonderful Simon Taylor, Melbourne-born comedian and author of the brand new novel, One Night Stand. By the age of 24, Simon became a writer for The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in Los Angeles. Since then, he has written for Sean McAuliffe's Mad as Hell on the ABC and Magic for Humans on Netflix. His one-hour comedy special was filmed at the famous Enmore Theatre in Sydney and went on to air on ABC and CBS Australia. Simon has also been featured on shows such as Comedy Up Late and Just for Laughs. Let's give a warm welcome to Simon. Want to tie your partner up in bed but don't know where to start? When you want to get a little frisky and brighten up your sex life, try Emojibator's new rainbow bondage rope, safe for restraint and suspension. Whether it be their classic emoji vibrators, silly pasties, or fab beauty products, Emojibator will deliver. Find all of their body-safe toys for pleasure at Emojibator.com and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 25% off your purchase. Follow them on Instagram at Emojibator. I bet you baked all the bread and binged all the TV shows during quarantine. But have you created an exact copy of your genitals? Yeah, I didn't think so. Meet Clone-A-Willy. Clone-A-Willy and Clone-A-Pussy are DIY molding kits that allow anyone to make an exact replica of a penis or vulva at home into a high-quality sex toy or memento. Check them out at www.cloneawilly.com and use promo code SEXED20 for 20% off your purchase. Follow them on Instagram at Clone-A-Willy Kit. Want to get your birth control with free delivery? Well, now you can with Pandia Health. Pandia Health makes our lives easier by bringing you birth control wherever you have internet and a mailbox. If you have a prescription, you can move it to their pharmacy and get your birth control delivered. If you don't have one, you can have their expert birth control doctors write you one. Find out more at pandiahealth.com. That's PANDIA health.com and use code SEXEDFREE to get a free telemedicine appointment for the first 50 people who sign up. Follow them on Instagram at Pandia Health. Offer only valid in Arizona, California, Florida, Texas, and Wyoming. Hello, Simon. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. You are in Melbourne, Australia. Well, currently in Sydney, but you live in Melbourne.
That's right. I live in Melbourne.
Yeah.
I had to do the mad border dash to Sydney so I could go on tour because borders open and close here very rapidly, depending on where cases may be. So I made it over to Sydney, where I will potentially continue my tour. Who knows?
Oh my God, who knows? And I was telling you before we started recording, it is so wild that you all in Australia and other places where they have better infrastructure and a better government and just people who are more caring about its citizens, that you guys are like COVID normal, as you said, but definitely more normal than we are here in the US, where we're still very much in our homes and not seeing people if you're being responsible. And, vaccines are very hard to come by and you got to get on lists. And it's just like still mayhem a year later. So very lucky for you to be able to go on tour and, see people and see your loved ones. And I'm very jealous.
Yeah, well, it sounds like the list thing is interesting to me. It sounds pretty normal for New York, though, like trying to get on a list to see a musical. Now it's to get a vaccine. So that's kind of part of normal. Yeah, exactly. I think we also just have a civil compliance here. When the government says, "Hey, masks on," everyone puts their mask on. Yeah. Basically, particularly in Melbourne, when our case numbers were rising and our government just did quite a big lockdown. And we accepted that. But we also have, I think, the financial support. So what blows my mind is America's meant to be the richest country in the world, and you guys got what, $600 a first, or no, $1,200 a first time, or something like that.
Oh yeah, it was not
we
great.
we were getting to about $2,500 a month.
Oh,
I'm still getting it.
my God.
It's called JobKeeper here, and it was financial support if you qualified. So if your business had suffered, I think 30 or 50%, decrease in income and profits, then we're eligible for JobKeeper. So in this time, people like comedians have been able to get $25,000 all up from, something like that.
I think I'm changing my profession. I think I'm going to become a comedian. Today's the day in Australia.
It's not even a comedian. It could have been anything. It could have been, maybe, probably not podcaster, because that job could still go. But, restaurants, for example, my friends who worked at a cafe,
right.
Baristas or something, realize, oh, my income's down, I'm going to apply for JobKeeper. So financial support from the government means that people are willing to comply because they're like, all right, I'm not going to go hungry. I don't need to work if the government's, has a lockdown but is paying me to be locked down. So, there's the fact that we're an island helps. The fact that we're a smaller population helps.
Yes.
And the fact that we have a government trust helps as well. So it's not equivalent,
right.
But
yes, absolutely. Well, nonetheless, thank you so much for being on. Let's back the truck up for a hot second. Why don't you tell the people who are listening what your name is, your pronouns, and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, COVID really takes the front stage all the time.
Too many times it does.
My name is Simon. I go by he, him, and I'm a stand-up comedian. And now a writer, I guess.
And now a fucking writer. Yes. Isn't that fun? Once you write a book, you're officially a writer, which is very exciting. A new thing.
I used to be a TV writer, and that didn't feel as legitimate as this. I have a book, and I can, throw it at things like it's a physical
can and you
thing.
will.
Yes, exactly.
And this is a question we've recently been asking, but I'm curious, what was sex ed like for you growing up in Australia?
So glad you asked this question. We had something called Harold the giraffe, right?
Go on.
Healthy Harold, right, is a giraffe puppet. And it would come around to schools in the Life Ed van. So there's this van that would come around, and we'd go in, and Healthy Harold, the giraffe puppet, would teach us about alcohol and drugs and sexual health. And so when people say, what do you remember about sex ed? I'm like, Harold. I remember Harold, the giraffe. And many Australians would, it's still around, but many Australians my age would say, oh, I learned sex ed from a giraffe. So.
And was that in elementary school, like when you were in like 1st through 5th grade?
Yeah. Around then for sure. So I think I maybe 2 visits, maybe 1st and then 4th grade or something like that. Because I don't think we would have got the sex ed stuff just too early. But at least some basic conversations about it. And I don't remember what the details were, but at the time we could ask questions. But I think the theory is the kids feel more comfortable asking a cartoony character questions as opposed to an adult, because there's a level, there's certainly a social barrier between kids just asking, anything to adults. Perhaps, there's a respect for a teacher. Maybe teachers
Sometimes.
say, no, kids ask anything, they'll ask anything. But I don't know. I don't know the full theory, but that's the sex ed we have, a giraffe puppet.
That's so funny. And what about in like middle school and high school? Did you have other comprehensive classes, or was that really like the main sex ed that you had access to?
Yeah, I don't know what the equivalent is in the States, but year 10 here. So what was that?
Grade?
Yeah, 10th grade. So 10th grade biology, we would have got the very biological understanding of, well, these are the ovaries and this is what the sperm does. So that sort of stuff. And and this may be your next question, but the actual practical education around sex and sexual relations and dating is non-existent. Sex ed is, this is the sperm, this is the egg, this is the zygote. Here are the names for all the things that you'll never see in this process. Yes. So on reflection, as good as it is to have this, biological education, pretty lax when it comes to the real world of sexual education.
So very unhelpful is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. In terms of the experience I went through,
which we will get to, trust me.
Yeah, it was incredibly unhelpful. And every new thing I learned was, why wasn't this taught? Why wasn't this taught? Yes. That was like a very, very common exclamation from me at that point.
Totally. Yes. Okay. So what is your background, and how did you become a TV writer and then a book writer and also a stand-up comedian?
Well, I went at school. I guess I was always the drama kid, but when I went to, I'm going to say university, even though I know it's college for you guys, I studied psychology at uni, and all throughout that, I was still a performing artist. I loved, writing songs, singer-songwriter, and then I kind of took up sort of magic and improv and spoken word poetry. And so I was always just like, how do I get these feelings out? Mm-hmm. And so stand-up just became what I turned to, because stand-up always seemed the most daunting. At least with improv, you got a team. Spoken word poetry, you're way more rigid in, you prepare it, you rehearse it. It's more like a play. And then stand-up took me a while to get the hang of, because it's way more conversational. The trick of stand-up is making it seem like it's not prepared, that you're just chatting. And so I came to it then, and throughout my studies, I was performing, but it wasn't until a couple of years later that I was making enough from performing that I'm like, well, I'll just do this. I won't do. With psychology, I was starting to work with kids with autism. In fact, I did it for about 4 years in different capacities. I did therapy with kids with autism, behavioral therapy, getting them ready to get into school. It's called early intervention. But then I was balancing working with kids with autism, doing stand-up, and then I was on a trip to LA, and someone from The Tonight Show saw me do stand-up and introduced me to Jay Leno, and then he offered me a job, so I was writing for Jay Leno for 2 years, and I stopped doing the psychology stuff altogether. So that was a little convoluted, but that's
that was exactly what I was looking for. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And so someone saw you, and Jay Leno just immediately was like, oh yes, this person needs to be on our writers team. Like, how did that happen?
He's a lot more casual than that, but I did a gig at a venue called Meltdown Comics. That's not there anymore in LA. And a producer from The Tonight Show saw me and said, hey, you're great, you should come see The Tonight Show. And I just went, and I thought, oh, great, I got a free ticket to The Tonight Show. Not knowing that they're all free, but I got a free ticket. And I was leaving, and after the show, the producer said, no, come meet Jay. And I was talking to Jay, and I was just chatting, and, I'm a comic. And he said, oh, okay, well, I hear you're funny, send some jokes in. So I went home and I wrote 2 pages of jokes, and it was just all, topical things. Obama said this today, punchline. Mitt Romney said this. This is how long ago? It was 2011. Yeah, 2011. And
seems like a distant dream.
It was a long time. When binders full of women was
Oh
the
my
worst
God,
thing a
when that was
Republican
the issue.
candidate could say. So I'm very intimate with American politics because I was writing for the show, and because I was just going through every detail a politician would say to get these jokes. And so I sent them in, and the next day they sent me a contract. So I
Wow.
actually didn't permanently live in LA. I was just back and forth. I was in Australia doing shows, Southeast Asia, traveling throughout the States and sending jokes in throughout the 2 years I was writing for him.
Wow, that's very cool. Very, very cool. A lot of people dream of doing the things that you have done and are doing, which is very cool.
Well, it's like all dreams, they're not, this magical. You wake up from them eventually. Oh, I still got to pay the rent. Like it's
Yeah,
not. It's,
sure.
yes, it is. I'm not dismissing how surreal and wonderful it is, but it's still work. It was still a
Totally.
job. I tell you what. In retrospect, I'm only starting to appreciate the magic of it now, going, wow, that was incredible. But at the time, it was nerve-wracking, like, oh my God, I got to write jokes for Leno. What if he doesn't want it? Then I send it off like, oh my God, what if I get fired on the first day? How embarrassing.
Oh,
Oh my
totally.
God, what if I'm fired after the first month? And even 2 years in is like, oh God, I don't want to like be embarrassed. So there was never any like, aha, I've made it. It's
Right,
only in
right.
retrospect, I'm like, that was really special. So with
Totally.
age comes that reflection.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's get into your book a little bit. It's called One Night Stand, and it's a story about a young man who is told he's going to be a dad after a one night stand, which is pretty similar to Knocked Up. My co producer was like, oh my gosh, this is like kind of like the story of Knocked Up. I'm sure there are a lot of,
Mm.
differences and twists and turns. Have you seen Knocked Up?
I have a long
Okay,
time
all
ago.
right.
Yeah.
Great movie, great premise. And so I'm curious, did this story come from personal experience? Like, tell me a little bit about it, and tell me maybe if there, are differences between the real life story and the book. Like, what happened in real life? What was your story?
So yeah, this is based on something that happened to me. I'll tell you the real story and then where it departs for the purposes of novelization.
Mm-hmm.
But I was seeing someone in Australia for about 6 months, and we were sleeping together, and then I was getting the opportunity to come back to America, and there was some work for me in New York. So I'm like, hey, listen, I'm going to move to New York. And she was super supportive. She's like, yeah, it felt like a casual thing. So I moved to New York. And about 4 weeks after, being in New York, I got a message from her saying, hey, I'm pregnant. And so we had a phone call. Went for about 8 hours. And, it was, what do you want to do? And, she was asking my feelings and my, perspective. And I said, well, look, I'm just moved to New York. Whatever you want to do, I will support. But this is a scenario. It's very, non-ideal,
Mm-hmm.
to do this. But how do you feel? And throughout this conversation, we just, came to the realization that she really, was absolutely set on having the kid. And I was, quite, I was actually quite happy. Like I felt this overwhelming sort of joy coming, like, wow, I'm going to be a dad.
Oh,
And,
wow.
yeah, I quite, because I was seeing her, I quite liked her. And
And how old
um,
were you and how old was she?
I was 28 and I think she was 23.
Okay.
So, and yeah, I had this feeling. I started calling my close friends and my sister. I'm like, I'm going to be a dad. I was really emotional, and just felt this real warmth at this idea of being a dad. Because, as I said before, I've worked with kids with autism for a long time. I really love kids. I really
Mm-hmm.
love this, that caregiving, nature, and so that was kind of awoken in me with that news. And then about 24 hours later, I got another message from her saying, actually, it might be another guy. I slept with a guy about 5 days after.
Shit, I really did not see that coming. Sorry.
You didn't know that?
No, something I didn't mention to the listeners is that I have read the first couple chapters of the book, and so I was very curious to see.
You got a big spoiler.
I know, big spoiler. We should have said spoiler.
You're about a chapter or two off that revelation in the book.
Okay.
But yeah, in real life, it was within 24 hours, I got a message saying it might be another guy. And then I'm like, well, how do we know? And thus began my deep sexual education rampage throughout all of the internet. I've read all of the internet. And I had to learn about ultrasounds, pregnancy dating, ultrasound error margin. Like, I got down to meta-analyses of how accurate ultrasound dating is depending on the days. Like, I had bell curves and everything.
Oh, wow.
Because general advice from doctors is doctors won't go into this guessing game. They'll just say, too close to tell, wait for a paternity test.
You just gotta wait, yeah.
You gotta wait. And so, yeah, lots of discovery about, can you get a prenatal paternity test? Well, there's an invasive one, which takes amniotic fluid, and
oh, wow.
There's a very small chance of miscarriage, but enough to not even dare.
Why risk it?
Yeah, why risk it? If it's like 0.05, that's still don't even do it, right?
Right. You can wait another couple months.
Right. Well, it didn't feel like a couple months. But there is a non-invasive one, which is a blood test of the mother, where they go through the blood. I think it's available after 8 weeks, where they go through the blood and try find blood cells of the child or cells of the child and use that as a test. However, that's, at least in Australia, is not legally recognised because it's. Even though the labs selling it to you will say it's super effective, the law doesn't recognise that. So let's say you got that test, it could be inconclusive. It could say, oh no, there's no match, and be wrong, or it could say it's a match and be wrong, and then legally, it's not that any of those results aren't binding. So it could say you're not the father, and then the mother could still take you to court saying those tests aren't, reliable. So in reality, the only way to know for sure was to wait till the child was born and get a, proper paternity test. Yeah. So it was 9 months of me becoming incredibly obsessed with contraception, the failure rates of every contraception, everything. And so because this was my world, because it was consuming me, and because I'm a stand-up comedian, I couldn't get on stage and just talk about politics or the weather or how weird are dogs compared to cats. I couldn't do that. So I was in New York having to, do shows, and all I could talk about, I just walked on stage one time in a sort of an open mic comedy club in East Village and just said, so I've just been told I'm going to be a dad. I don't know what to do. I haven't told my family. You are my family now. 8 people in the crowd. And I just had to talk about it on stage. And eventually this story became a 1-hour show talking about my experience. I didn't really mention the mother very much in the show, just sort of that she told me she was pregnant and it might be another guy. And that was kind of it for what I would say. And I just wanted to talk about my feelings, everything I'd learned, how uneducated I felt. Mm-hmm. Like the number one thing for me was never knowing that pregnancies aren't dated from conception. I never knew that. And then learning, many people don't know that. Young women don't know that. As I've been doing this in shows, after shows, men, women, medical professionals, nurses, sonographers have gone, I actually didn't know that either. And it's crazy the lack of practical education of, when someone gets pregnant, here's what you need to know. too often, sex education for at least young men, from my experience, was wear a condom and that's it.
Right.
It's like, well,
if you even get that information.
Yeah, even if you get that. And then that's not even enough. I got into failure rates of condoms, 2% if you wear them correctly, but it's 16% if you don't wear it correctly.
Right.
The joke I said, you got to ask questions. Like, was it too big? Was it too small? Did you open the packet with your teeth?
Mm-hmm.
Did you wear it? You can't just have it.
Correct.
You need to put it on.
Expiration date. Did you put it in your wallet? Was there a bubble in it still?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's all these things that people went, I wore a condom, the end, like that. And that was actually what the other guy said. The other guy said he wore a condom, and I asked, the woman, did he wear a condom? He says he did. She's like, we were really drunk. We don't know. And you're like, oh my God.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I have two responses. Number one, this is more so now sounding like a mix between Mamma Mia and Knocked Up, which I absolutely love. Right. Big Mamma Mia fan. Less singing, Mia, probably more, confusion and sadness and worry, and planning. Yeah. But I'm so curious, what fucking happened? You gotta, spoiler alert ahead. What happened in real life to you?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what happened to me, but the book transpires slightly differently. I eventually developed quite severe OCD and quite negative symptoms. I had to started seeing a therapist, and was diagnosed with sort of experiencing an emotional trauma, general anxiety disorder. Because what was happening was every piece of information I was getting from the mother, and remember I'm overseas, so I'm getting calls and text messages of okay, I just had this ultrasound, I'm 7 weeks, and I'm sitting there with calculators and pregnancy calculators. All right, so if she's 7 weeks, then when did she last have, because she didn't know when she had her last period, because pregnancies, I learned, was dated from last period. And so if she didn't know, what they do when they do an ultrasound is they put, okay, period unknown. And then the ultrasound, the computer automatically adds the average day of ovulation, which is day 14, which is 2 weeks. So if you don't know the last period and you're told you're 7 weeks pregnant, the computer is guessing you probably conceived about 5 weeks ago. So then I'm going, all right, so 5 weeks ago. And then the day was pretty much in between me and the other guy.
Oh, no.
So now I'm sitting there with a bell curve counting the days. I'm like, so what are the odds? So I'm sitting there I became obsessed. And then throughout the pregnancy, she developed preeclampsia. And so that is a blood pressure disorder related to being pregnant that requires the mother to be on med. So then I'm like, does that affect the pregnancy dating? So here I am trawling through scientific journals. Does preeclampsia affect the pregnancy dating? Just all sorts of stuff, trying to work out my odds. And what's interesting is I had before the kid was born, the day before, I knew based on all my math, I spoke to mathematicians about this is how deep in it I was, right? Because I was getting these floods of adrenaline and dopamine and so depending on what I thought the information was. And I also was cycling between what I wanted the result to be. At first it was I want to be the dad, but then it was such a mess. It's I don't want to be, I just want to escape from this. And then I'm like, oh, I want to care for the mother. And then the other guy didn't want to get involved. So then I definitely wanted to be there.
He didn't. He had made that clear.
Well, he was I wore a condom, can't be me, F you, I want nothing to do with this.
Okay.
And so then she emotionally relied on me, and then I wanted to be there for her. And then my friends, then it was becoming evident from my research that the odds were quite low that it was me. But emotionally, I wanted it to be me because I was forming a connection with this mother. And then my friends were advising, don't, because what if you get involved, get attached to this kid and it's not your kid, and then the father does want to get involved? How messy will that be?
Wow.
Or he has a right to his kid, and then you've just slid into this? That's not fair either. So it became this completely tumultuous situation of what knowing what's likely, what do I want to happen, and that became very emotionally distressing and very emotionally draining. And I'm still, years on, I'm still dealing with the the mental health
PTSD.
it's emotional trauma. I'm on medication because I'm on antidepressants now because I was starting to self-harm like a year ago. Like, no, there's probably a little longer, 2 years ago. And that's quite odd for a guy in his 30s to self-harm, especially if I never did it as a teenager. So I should complete the story. Sorry.
I'm so anxious to hear the ending.
I have to buy the book. Thanks, everyone. No.
And that's a wrap.
That's it. The day before the ultrasound, the day before the paternity test, the kid was born, got the paternity test. The day before, I had it down to about 0.11% that I would be the dad, based on all the research, right? But emotionally, it was a coin flip. Emotionally, it was like, oh my God, this could be it. I think I want it to be me. I get the results. I'm at the dining room table with my mum and dad, and I get the email, and it says I'm not the dad. Oof. And I just cried and cried for like hours. I just spent the day like in the fetal position crying, and it was really upsetting and emotional and really difficult. And people would say, people would ask me, because I told my friends, they go, oh, you must feel relieved. And it was a weird reaction from some people. They were like, oh, woohoo, you're not the dad.
Right.
But for me, I felt loss. I was grieving, for a time. And it wasn't until, months later, I was like, felt a little bit of relief and like, well, I'm glad the whole, craziness is over. But I did, like, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
No, don't apologize.
I really wanted to be a dad. And
yeah.
I had imagined being a dad. I imagined having the kid, holding the child, raising the kid. And I think something that is a misconception from I think Hollywood in general, but it might have started there, is that this little factoid that gets thrown around that women become mothers when they find out they're pregnant, and men become fathers when they hold the child. From my experience, that's total bullshit. That's total bullshit. When I found out I was going to be a dad, when I first got that news, I felt this overwhelming sense of sort of joy and excitement, and finding out I wasn't the dad was a massive loss. And so I was grieving for this imagined life that I had with this kid, and it ended in quite severe depression, and I said self-harm, and now I'm still on medication to just mitigate the fallout. So not a happy ending, but a real one.
A realistic one, yeah. First of all, I really appreciate you sharing all of that and all of the challenges and hardships that come along with that, just because I think, I'll speak for myself, like as a cis woman, I typically feel that in situations of like unplanned or unexpected pregnancy, the first person always to think about in my mind is the cis woman or the birthing person. And I think like this story really challenges that perception in a very intentional and positive way, because when we think about cis men, we often don't think about the hardships that they potentially face, because when we think of the science and the statistics and the studies that really show that like cis women, and of course like queer women, like non-binary folks, trans folks, are the people who financially like struggle the most when it comes to unplanned pregnancies, when it comes to being able to afford like, food, education, shelter, like things like that, when they don't have access to contraception and when they don't have like a second parent in the picture. That is like me as a person who is a sex educator and someone with a master's of public health who really like cares about these things. Like that is what I think of. And I think, again, like we need to really be thinking of everyone involved, including folks like you and folks who experience being a part of maybe a woman's story without having any control, and the anxiety and the
Right.
depression that can come from that is very real and
Right.
tangible. And so I just want to like affirm you and like your experience and
Thank
your
you.
feelings, just because
Mm,
it is a story that is so necessary to share,
mm,
and
mm,
really admire, like I really admire the fact that you were willing to kind of, even though, you know, the book diverts from your real life, the fact that
mhm,
you reached out and like wanted to come on the podcast and share this and be vulnerable
mm,
is, it
mm,
tells a lot. So I'm just very
mm.
appreciative of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't feel too bad in the sense that I guess if you're trying to determine where is your energy best spent with an unplanned pregnancy, a lot of the burden is on the mother. Like that's undoubtable. Like it's even if we were to come up with a figure like 90% of the burden is going to be of the situation is going to be
Sure.
on the mother and on the female in that situation. And let's say it's that, it's still worth spending 10% of your energy just checking on the father as well.
Exactly.
So whatever the number is, maybe it's 99%, that
Sure.
whatever it is. Well, just put 1% towards the father as well. I guess, telling this story isn't an attempt to pull attention. It's just to speak the truth and to remind people that, a pregnancy even isn't just the mother and father. It's the community. Who else is going to be, supporting this child?
Hmm.
Grandparents, siblings, the neighborhood. Like it takes a village is a great reminder, great old adage. So I had this strange experience when I was in New York. I was at Dunkin' Donuts, I think
Sure.
on 14th, and I was messaging the mother. This is probably, maybe 7 weeks in or 6 weeks into the pregnancy, and on the phone next to me was a dude, a young man, probably around my age, on the phone, and he was like talking to a woman, saying, he's like, "Hey, we need, if I'm Christian, so I want to have it. You make a decision, but from my point of view, I want to have it." And so I'm like, "Hold on."
Oh,
So he
no
finishes the
way.
call up. I'm like, "Wait, do you have an unexpected pregnancy as well?" And so I had this bonding moment with this random guy where he's like, "Yeah, I want to have this kid." He's like, "It's part of my religion, it's part of my faith."
What are the
And he's
fucking
like,
chances that someone right next
it
to you
was
in Dunkin'
crazy.
Donuts,
So we had this in Dunkin' Donuts on
of all
14th in East
places?
Village. It was insane. And so I had this heart to heart with this, dude who's from a very different background to me. He was, I think he was from, I think he's from the Bronx, black guy. He was like doing, I think, Uber Eats on a bike, like very different. I think he already had a kid to someone else, and he's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm hustling. I'm out here hustling to make sure that my kid eats, and if I have another kid, well, I've got to just hustle more." It's like, well, so this guy's whole life is about providing, and so he probably isn't getting a look in this situation, other than, what's your financial contribution? That's probably the only real question. It's not like, how are you feeling? What are you
Totally.
experiencing? What do you, that sort of thing. Because ultimately, in terms of like, the early decision about keeping the child falls on the mother. And I think, at least in the circles I roll in, it's accepted that it's the mother's choice. I know that that's still an issue in the States in many places, but it is still a conversation to be had. So I just told my truth, and after shows and people reading this book saying, "Oh, didn't even know this truth existed." So whatever proportion of attention it gets in a unplanned pregnancy, awareness is positive, I think.
Totally. Yeah, that was gonna kind of be my next question about like what the reception of the book has been like, and those who are listening, now you know what really happened. But if you want to know the secrets of how the book deviates, then you can go buy the book. But I'm curious how people in Australia reacted. Is it different than how people in the States like reacted based on kind of maybe different cultures? Like, what has the reception been like in general?
It's pretty universal. The reaction has been after doing stand up and the shows. People will come up to me after the show and sort of lean in, call them leaners. They'll lean in and they'll say, something similar actually happened to me.
Okay, so they're like down to share their stories as well.
Yeah, it's not something you will bring up in casual conversation. But because I've been honest, it's almost like this lighthouse, this beacon where people go, aha, honesty about pregnancy. And then other people are drawn to it. And so I get, like buff, like biker, motorbike riding men coming up to me afterwards and go, yeah, something similar happened to me. It's a pretty brutal experience, real emotional. And then, anyway, good show, mate, real funny, and walk off, And so they're never asked. Those guys are never asked. And it has been really encouraging that people feel like they can actually express this, because a lot of the time it's something I did and what caused a lot of my issues. I didn't actually tell my parents for most of it. Maybe for the first 7 months I didn't mention any.
Okay.
Yeah, for a long time, because what I was trying to do was contain it. And a lot of people do this. They contain the emotions. They contain the situation. Well, I don't want to talk to anyone about my feelings because I don't, especially if it's early in in a pregnancy. Just say like young kids in their early 20s get pregnant. They're like, well, what do we do? Let's contain this. Let's not tell anyone. We don't want the social backlash. We don't want religion getting involved. We don't want everyone's opinions, because the government, like there's so much that comes into try sway and influence you that it becomes overwhelming. So you try to fix it and contain it. So telling the story has at least, if even in a small increment, allowed people to go, oh, is it safe to come out? Is it safe to talk about this? And it seems like such a, common thing. Babies. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
Right.
But it's the fact that people felt they had to lean in and tell me they had a similar experience was quite illuminating. And so when I was asked to do the book, someone saw my live show and said this should be a novel. I felt really positive about learning to write a novel, because I'm like, if this story can get into more people's hands, then I think it's worth it. So that's why I wrote the book.
Amazing. And my last question for you is, I'm curious, what's next for you? What directions do you want to take your career? Is this something where you're like, oh wow, writing was super fun and that's something I want to keep doing? Or is stand-up comedy, the place where you're going to spend most of your energy for the next couple of years? Where are you headed?
Well, stand-up comedy may not, feasibly be a viable career depending on how vaccines roll out. But I guess it's just being a storyteller feels rewarding. And however it has to be, whether it's a podcast, which is really powerful tool these days, whether it's another book, maybe I won't get another deal, who knows, whether it's stand up. I think just being honest about my experience and telling my truth, whatever it is. I never set out to say, hey, people need to know this, or hey, here's the story I think people want to know. I was just consumed by an emotion and I express that emotion. So whatever I'm consumed by, I guess what is next for me, just to continue speaking my truth, and that whatever that will be. So I'm in a loving long-term relationship currently. we're looking to get married and have kids. So I'm sure there will be something worth talking about.
Something else down the line.
Yeah, exactly. So look, maybe when I have a kid with my partner, maybe I'll write another book on all the other things I didn't know.
Right.
Because as much as I obsessed with learning a lot of things about pregnancy, it's just this whole world that is worth learning to communicate better, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Simon, thank you so much for being on. This has been such an amazing conversation, very illuminating, and wonderful to meet you. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Want to win a year's worth of free lube? Yeah, I'll bet you do. All you have to do is enter the secret code word into the Uberlube Google form on our Instagram linktree, and bam, you're entered to win that sweet year's worth of lube. I'll bet you want to know what that code word is right about now, don't you? Okay, fine, I'll tell you, but don't tell anyone. The secret code word is slippery. Enter that word into the Google form on our Instagram linktree and you'll be entered to win. Good luck! If you're someone in a long-distance relationship, quarantine can be especially difficult without your boo. What if you could have an exact replica of your partner's penis or vulva to use as a sex toy? Intrigued? Learn more at www.clone-A-Willy.com and use promo code SEXED20 for 20% off your purchase. Sex Ed with DB is supported by Pandia Health, the only doctor-led birth control delivery company. Here are some fun facts about Pandia Health. Most birth control is free with insurance, or for $15 per pack without. Your birth control comes with free delivery and free goodies. And you can get an online doctor visit if you need it, which is perfect during COVID-19. Go to pandiahealth.com, that's PANDIA health.com, and use code SEXEDFREE to get a free telemedicine appointment for the first 50 people who sign up. Offer only valid in Arizona, California, Florida, Texas, and Wyoming. Our creator, co-producer, sound engineer, and host is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our co-producer and communications lead is Cathren Cohen. Our main logo and banner graphic were created by Andrea Forgacs. Our social media intern is Leslie Lopez. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Our ad music is by my stepdad, Bill Gant. Thank you so much to our featured guests, partners, and our listeners. If you're interested in advertising with us, email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more Sex Ed content, follow us on Insta @sexedwithdbpodcast. Tune in next time.